Welcome to the U3 Media Podcast, where our mission is to unite the world through coffee, connecting you to the farmers and coffee entrepreneurs through the stories they share. I'm Christy Ross, and joining us today is Ildi Revi, Chief Coffee Officer at Purity Coffee. Welcome, Ildi. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Christy. I love talking about coffee.
Well, I am looking forward to that. What I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to set the stage for you. So for the benefit of the audience, you are also a performance consultant at Ally Coffee. You previously were an education manager at SCA, managing all coffee education programs, and I believe designing curriculum for them. And you were the president of Leopard Forest Coffee for a dozen years, which I believe sold in 2016. And then I guess if we sort of add all that up, you've collectively been in coffee for about 25 years.
Correct.
Okay. And then one more stat is prior to that, you were in education administration, I think, for 9, inside and outside the U.S. Are all my numbers right?
Your numbers are right, but the interesting thing is that the education's never ended. I've been in organizational learning throughout the entire coffee career. So even though I was roasting coffee, I was like continually involved. So I consider myself more of a learning and development professional who is immersed in the coffee industry. So I would frame my life's work more that way.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense with everything I've read about you. So before we dive into coffee, why don't you tell us a little bit about your years in early education and sort of what and where you were teaching?
Well, so I went to University of Texas at Austin, and when I graduated, I was at a loss of what to do, couldn't, find a job, as it's hard out there still. And I volunteered to go to Zimbabwe to teach with a non-denominational organization that was placing teachers from the developed world into really remote classrooms. And they partnered with the missions, various missions of different denominations, so that half the teachers would teach in rural schools and half the teachers would teach at the mission school. And so then we could live on the missions, where it was sort of like you had healthcare and all of that stuff, because they wanted us to stay healthy, because if we weren't healthy, we couldn't do our jobs. So I taught in the Zambezi Valley in 1989 and 1990, and there was no electricity. There was still a dirt road out there. The water was sporadic at best. And so I did that for 2 years, teaching math and science by candlelight at night. I'm learning, like doing my lesson plans. And so when I finished that contract, I went back to Chicago, which is where I was born, and did a master's degree in adult learning, because I just really fell in love with doing literacy and other adult learning work, like sort of as a volunteer while I was volunteering. Actually, when I was, as just side note, when I was in Zimbabwe is when I was introduced to the best cup of coffee of my life. Yes, I was traveling around with a writer named Doris Lessing. I don't know if you've ever heard of Doris Lessing. She's written she actually won a Nobel Prize for literature a few years ago. Anyway, so she came and visited, and we hooked up because of this nun who knew her. And so we drove around Zimbabwe, and she was like, my son owns a coffee farm. So we went out there and I stayed with him, and we became really close friends. So I spent my holidays with him on these coffee farms. And he would roast the coffee in a wok in the morning, and he had a Jersey cow in his front yard, and he would milk the cow, and we would I mean,
Oh my God, I
great.
love that. Like, who
So,
experiences that? There are very few people in this world, especially in the US, that have ever experienced something like that.
well, he was wonderful. His name was John Wisdom, and he and I stayed in touch for a long time. So I got back to Chicago and worked on my master's degree in I decided to do organizational learning, which is focusing on work and how people learn at work. I don't know why I did that, but it just was interesting to me. And I kept in touch with John. And then one day he stopped answering his phone. And I found out about a year later that he had passed away. So I was working in Chicago, and I was working at the Howard Area Community Center doing literacy, employment, adult learning, and then all these all these high school students started coming to my classes for GED, and I said, "You guys can't be in here. You need to be in." And they said, "Well, the schools won't let us in." You know, these were like gang kids and girls who were pregnant who had gone to too many schools, and they just like fell through the system. And then the Chicago Public Schools opened grant for alternative high schools. So the executive director of Howard area said, "Let's open a high school." I said, "Okay, let's open." So we opened a high school. So there I was running this high school and adult learning program in Chicago, but I missed Africa so much. They said, once you taste the water of the Zambezi, you can never leave. And it was calling to me, calling. So there was a conference. I sent one of my teachers, and she came back and she said, "Ildi, there is a job in Mozambique for the U.S. Information Service teaching Mozambican English teachers how to design workplace learning programs." So it was
Perfect.
like
It's
perfect fit
perfect.
for me. And I spoke Spanish, so then I learned Portuguese for about 6 months, got on a plane, resigned from the job, and went to Mozambique for 2 years. But the first thing I did when I had my first holiday was drive up to the mountains of Zimbabwe, which is right next door, to find out what happened to John. So I found out, and when I did, I ran into a neighbor of his, really cute young guy who was skeet shooting. And that was the beginning of falling in love with this coffee farmer. And we ended up getting married and having 2 kids and living in Zimbabwe on a coffee farm. For next door, he was John's neighbor. And his family had owned the farm since the 60s. And so there I was working after my Mozambique contract ended, doing adult learning, but then helping work on the coffee farm. I computerized the farm, did all the books and all the labor, did all the contracts and the union stuff, and designed. Oh, we had so much fun. The there was a church next door, and they had AIDS. It was in the heyday of AIDS, like really bad. So we did this theater competition all around for AIDS education, and we would travel like some of the workers in the school. So anyway, it was really a good time. So that's how I got into coffee, and then moved to South Carolina. Some political stuff happened in Zimbabwe, and we just decided to open a coffee place in America. And so we just did a bit of research and looked at South Carolina, and that was that.
Okay. Well, and I have a million questions. So I know that there's I want to hear about opening the coffee shop, but I want to sort of circle on closing the loop on those early days in education, because I'm so impressed with that whole story and how it evolved. I mean, you can't even like make a beautiful story up like that. I mean, it is so cool. I think there are so many people who would love to have experienced something like that. And I love the fact that you met your husband when you just went to check on John. So okay, so when you talk about the education, like creating a curriculum, and no matter what it is, it sounds like what you've done is created incredibly sticky curriculum like how do you actually create effective curriculum that has there's stickiness to it, that you actually no matter what the subject is, right? Because you have been one of the most influential coffee educators, and I'm positive with anything else you've taught, again, no matter the subject, it sounds like you've been incredibly effective at that. So what is the key?
The key is involving the learners from the beginning, and the this goes back, it goes back to the days of apprenticeships, right, where you learn side by side with someone. But there was when I was doing my master's, I fell in love with Miles Horton, who was educator who learned education from the Swedish folk schools. And he was in the 1930s. He started with union, um, sort of activism. He was part of the educating people, and people couldn't read and they couldn't write back in the and so how did they learn to do that? Through problem solving. Meanwhile, at the same time in the 1960s, Paulo Freire is doing the same thing in the slums of Brazil, the Swedish folk schools. So whenever I work with adult learning, it has to be in community, because that's how people learn. And that's how we built the specialty coffee programs. In 2007, I had been we opened our coffee roasting company in 2005, January. And I was trying to learn all the roasting and coffee stuff, because I'd been on the farm then for plus or minus 8 years. So I had that stuff sort of, I understood that. And we had a roaster there that my husband had built. It was a charcoal roaster. That's how I learned on it. But I really wanted to learn coffee. And so I turned to the Specialty Coffee Association of America at the time. This was before the Europeans and the Americans merged. And I wanted to learn from them. Here were all these great professionals. And I went to the conferences and tried to take the classes, and I could see that the content could be really good, but it just could have used a little bit of love, a little bit of massaging. So in 2007, I wrote a email to the executive director and said, "Hey, I've been a learning professional for a few years. I'd like to join the training committee." One of the things I did is the first teachers who came to Mozambique after their civil war. I was still hooked up with the embassy, so I worked with the Peace Corps, and I did the teacher training of these. I was 8 months pregnant with my first kid doing in Mozambique. Anyway,
that's impressive.
It was beautiful working with these young people. Anyway, so I had done teacher training for several years. And so he hooked me up with one of the key people in the coffee industry. If you didn't, maybe you'll interview her sometime. Her name is Ellie Hudson. She had worked at Intelligentsia in Chicago. And was their training person, and she ran the training committee in 2007. And so she and I put our heads together, and she said, "Let's design a teacher training program." So it was what we call an educator learning program. I don't really like training is mechanical. So you train on an espresso machine, but you learn how to teach, right? You learn different things. So we looked at all the curriculum, and there were groups of subject experts. So we had barista, we had the brew crew, which did just brewing. The Roasters Guild had their education section, and I think that was it at the time. Was there one other one? But eventually we started a green coffee
Oh, okay. So
curriculum. Oh, and a coffee tasters.
like a sensory.
Yeah, a
Okay.
sensory, a
Yeah.
company. So each one was its own community. So it was basically like we were running 5, 6 communities, and they were learning how to teach and design curricula while designing the curricula. So we took the content that they were all masters of, and they had bits and pieces, but made it a cohesive curriculum. So, and then I took it and would polish it, and put it in education Sprachen and structure and stuff like that. And so from that developed the certificate programs, which they call certification, but they're actually certificate programs. And yeah, so that was 2007. Fast forward to 2010, they hired Ellie full time. And from 2010, she kept saying to me, "Will you please come work here? Will you please come work here?" So in 2011, I agreed and started working full time. Then in 2012, we took our show on the road to Europe, where the Europeans said, "Hey, could you guys come here?" So we trained 32. We did a program with 32 top educators of the European Coffee Association. And we handed them our entire Dropbox of all the materials. So they had all of our Barista Guild curricula we had designed, and all of our brewing and everything, roasting, cupping, green coffee. And then they took that and transformed that into their curricula. So it's a really, and that's what makes it sticky. And it was just the collaborative work. We all learned from each other. I mean, people had aha moments, and people, as they were learning this, as you deconstruct what you relearn it, and that's
Oh,
what
for
makes it
sure.
sticky.
Right. And just being able to teach it makes sure that you actually understand the concepts. But Ildi, this is the epitome of the coffee industry, of what I've experienced so far, is the sharing of information and um the community and the locking arms just for a better experience all around. But I was what you guys did, what you did, going over to Europe is it truly is the epitome of what happens in the coffee industry. So I want to ask you, with when you look at all of the people that you taught to be those teachers.
Almost 1,000. Actually, I think it was almost 1,200 last time. 1,200 people
1,200.
were in my
Yeah.
teacher learning classroom.
But what do you look for in people that would make them a good teacher?
They volunteered, they self-selected. It was from their hearts. Sometimes people wanted to do it to promote their business, but once they got in the classroom and started working with other people, they just fell in love with the people, and it just becomes a community learning thing, but we need that because we have um different equipment, different business types. I mean, when you say coffee shop, a coffee shop in Chicago is very different than a coffee shop in Pumpkin Town,
Sure,
you know?
sure, sure. No, I totally agree.
So, and people have different visions. We're talking about a lot of small business owners mixed in with corporations. We had Starbucks people, and they were in there with everybody. They were salt of the earth. They were sharing. They were just as much coffee people as everybody else. Tim Hortons people, Caribou people, from big companies, and yet they were just coffee people, you know, and the small business owners, they have a vision for what they want to do, and to be able to, so that when they would join to be teachers, it would be so that they could figure out how to promote their vision to their employees, and that's the best way to move your company forward.
For sure, for sure. So Ildi, over the past 5 years, like the SCA has sort of changed their platform for teaching a little bit, right? I mean, is there like what actually has changed from when you guys created this amazing curriculum to now? Like what is that? And have you switched over to some of those changes? Were they tweaks? Was it an overall? Like what was it that they did?
Well, I have to say, I'm not entirely sure. Well, I kind of know what happened. So when we found out we were merging, Ellie and I, this was 2015. So Ellie and I had been doing this for 8 years. And we knew our European counterparts and we were friends with them. And I mean, like we were all, but their program was, they designed it, they packaged it different so that um, they could get out there and do more, have people learn in several day chunks. We had a curricula where we designed it so that you master one area, and, and you take the course, you go back, you master it, then you come back for the next course, and then all those pieces together would add up to your certificate. They designed a course where you would go for 3 days and drink from a fire hose and do all of what was in our several, what took somebody a year or two to complete with us would take 3 days to complete with them. So it was easier, but it was a different education underpinning and a different learning underpinning. And the certificate was not the the outcome of our program. I mean, it was, but and people aspired to get it, but they were there to learn and to really be in collaboration, whereas the certificate's the outcome of that program. And I remember Ellie got a new supervisor. This person was hired to sort of help oversee the management. And he said, I remember this vividly. He looked at us and he said, they have thousands of certificate holders, more than tens of thousands more than we have. They're crushing us. We
Yeah.
need to use their program.
Oh, I see. Well,
And so, and at that point, I thought, well, that's fine. Look, the content is the same; it's different. People learn, and adults are wonderful. They're resilient. They'll learn. They're. It's not that their program. I mean, it was just different. People will take what they learn and go back and use it for their
but
businesses,
they
and that's
probably
beautiful.
understood it at a deeper level with you, because it is more of that doing over time and probably repetition and, connecting the dots. But I remember, I'm going to take that a step further for a second. So when I first jumped into coffee, which is, literally not that long ago, I jumped in with 2 feet, went and did the certification program, right? It was like 5 days. It was the green, the sensory, the
We did
brewing,
those,
the
the
roasting. Yeah,
SBA
yeah, yeah.
programs.
And so I did those. But when I first asked about it, because I come from the world of technology and financial services, I was like, okay, what can I do online? And the instructor was like, no, 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 no. You can't do these online. You need to be in person, touching, feeling, smelling, understanding it at a deep level. And I totally appreciated that. I was like, you know what? That made all the difference in the world. And then I think about the way that you guys taught, and I feel like it would be even better stringing that out over time to really, be in the classroom with more people doing that same thing. Because that was the other thing, is having other people that were learning at the same time as me was really helpful, because some of the questions they were asking, it just sort of elevated everything you were experiencing. I don't know. I enjoyed it, and I want to take more classes, which is going to lead me to my next question with you, because when we talk about Q grader, right, that's not the next step for me. I mean, I have several more in between, but you're also a Q grader, right? So,
And I'm a Q instructor,
a Q instructor. Okay. So what,
Arabica.
yeah. Okay. So when you look at Q graders, there's what, 7,000 Q graders in the world, and only I think 10% of those are in the US. I mean, when you think about that, that's not that many, right? Do you know how many of those are women or self-identifying women?
I I don't know. I think there need to be more. But I actually don't know. There are quite a few women teachers though. I'm just thinking I was just on the Q website looking at the instructors, and but a lot more women are joining. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's CQI, right? The Coffee
Coffee
Quality
Quality
Institute.
Institute,
Okay.
correct.
Okay. So when you so as far as there's a new grading system now, right? A new Q grading system. So talk about the comparison between the two, and with you working in this area, where do you think you can have the most impact?
The new system is still in its beta phase. It's still being developed. It's like almost it's sort of baked, but they may like bake it some more. Maybe they need to frost it. I don't know.
Put a cherry on top. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. So it is a system as opposed to a cupping form. So the first thing about it is you need to know how to cup before you can use the system right now. And so they because if you get in there, and the new system is based on a lot of sensory training from that they got from UC Davis. It's a funny thing, and let me tell you a little bit of history about the coffee industry here. Is when we were starting with the cupping classes, the first cupping classes, you had a tray in front of you and 3 cups, and you would taste the cups, and you would like evaluate the cups. And when we started to do our community building, redoing things, all the people who were cuppers said, that's not how we do it in the industry. And so we started doing proper cupping, which is a 5-cup tray, and using the SCA cupping form, which was developed by Ted Lingle with Cornell University in the 90s. I'm pretty sure it was Cornell. He went to one sensory person and they designed the form. Then there were a couple iterations of it, and then it became the form that was used by the industry. And that's what, once they had the form, they said, we have to train people to use the form. So first they took all the people who were cupping the most and said, we're going to train you as teachers so that you can go out and then teach the cupping form all over the world, because we need to all grade specialty coffee equally. And Ellie and I did a teacher training in 2010 for the CQI instructors, which then, they had been going since 2004, but then it really blasted around the world. So then people were traveling all over the world teaching. And then more teachers came up from all over the world teaching within their countries and so on. So this form now, when we talk about specialty coffee, is 80 points or more. It comes from this form. Fast forward now to maybe about 2014, and somehow the coffee industry woke up to the fact that there's a whole world of sensory analysis out there, that people have been tasting and evaluating all sorts of things. Like, we saw cupping as this magic thing that only we did, but it was like, no, we're just one food product out there. And there are honey tasters and there are we all knew there were wine tasters and beer tasters and mustard taste. I worked
And bourbon tasters.
right. Yeah, anything tasters, and so how did we do sensory analysis? And they realized this world of sensory analysis was back in the 1940s, developed for, the frack packs they had for the soldiers to make sure that they had something decent tasting in their meal boxes, and so then the coffee industry was like, what? we need to be sensory analysts who specialize in coffee. So they entered the whole world of UC Davis sensory analysis and started learning that. And so now the new system, the whole is divided into three parts. The first part is just descriptive analysis of a coffee. You don't even score it. You just say, what does the fragrance smell like? What is the aroma? What is the acidity? And you just use descriptors, apple-like, peach, rubber, skunky, whatever are the words that you're going to use for the thing. Once you do the descriptive analysis, then you do a hedonic thing is how do you perceive the quality of this? And now we have some numbers that we can use, but they go from 0 to 10. And so, which is very different than the cupping form, which starts at 6, because if it's not 6, it shouldn't be on the table.
It shouldn't be there, right? Okay, got it. Yeah.
And so then we do this quality assessment perception. And it's supposed to be more inclusive for and more culturally appropriate, because what is high quality for some people in certain areas of the world may not be liked in other areas of the world.
So very subjective, right?
Right.
It's a subjective.
So it doesn't even pretend to be objective. It says, this is my perception of quality.
Yeah, got it. And
then the final part of the form is where you learn about the producer and what the cultivar is, the altitude, the this, the that, the certifications, and so on. Because some people get that information first, it will influence their perception of the descriptive analysis or the quality. If you wait until you do all of them and then you find out what the coffee is in the end, then you can add that to the value system. But it's not influencing your decision. So in some respects, this new system is very helpful, but right now it's extremely intellectual. Talks about value. And I mean, look, value has been debated since humans have existed. What is value and what is perceived value? So and there's a lot of writing and there's a lot of reading and so we have a lot of non-writing and reading and English speaking people in our industry. So they have some hurdles to get through. But yeah, so that's
super helpful, and I think it was great for you to sort of walk through that, especially for me and anybody that's sort of entering the world of coffee, but anybody that doesn't really know the history of how and why that was developed. So that was awesome. So I want to jump over to Purity Coffee. So tell us a little bit about Purity Coffee and what it offers, and then also talk a little bit about your role as Chief Coffee Officer.
So this is great because when the SCAA merged with the Europeans, that was 2016, and they were going to adopt the European program, and I thought, and I helped with the transition a bit, but I thought, I've done this now 10 years. I kind of want to do something else. And a friend of mine owned an importing company, said, hey, come, we need an education person. So I said, I'm going to dive back into the industry. So I started working there, and he introduced me to one of their clients who wanted coffee for health purposes. And I had no idea. We actually thought he was a little kooky, but it turns out he's from your industry. He's like finance and tech and stuff like that. And and it turns out he is one of the greatest leaders I have ever met. He's brilliant because he sees things that other people don't see. And he wasn't a coffee guy. So he asked all these questions that I was like, yeah, why does the industry do it? That you're kind of right. So drinking coffee for health, he wanted to create a coffee because his wife was unwell and he wanted her to be drinking the best quality coffee. People forget that coffee is a food product.
Yeah, right.
It's just until you dive into the industry, it's just this brown stuff people start their morning with. And then people start to realize that there is different qualities. So you can get better quality or different flavors with it. but people don't drink it for health purposes. It turns out coffee is very good for you. And by the way, the FDA is almost getting the NCA, the National Coffee Association, just put out a couple weeks ago that they're considering calling coffee a healthy food product,
Uh,
which
as they
is like,
should. I think they should. I've been reading
right?
articles on this like for years, like decades, because I'm obsessed with coffee, always have been on the side. And it is one of those things where whether it's mental performance or sports performance or neurodegenerative,
Correct.
right. I mean, you start to go through the
Girl liver, bourbon drinking
liver. Yes.
girl lit like it. The one of the our board members is Sanjeev Chopra of Harvard Medical School, who's been a liver specialist, who's been telling his patients to drink coffee since the 80s. He's
Wow.
like, but
Okay.
it turns out that there's different health levels of coffee. Just like any agricultural product, you're going to get healthier blueberries from some farms than from other farms. So what Andrew Salisbury, the CEO of Purity, said is, if we make every choice based on health, what is the healthiest coffee we can put out? Well, it turns out there's lots of healthy coffees, and how we roast it makes a difference. So we've studied every aspect. I work with a scientist in Brazil. We're working with amazing coffee producers in Colombia, Nicaragua, and Honduras who have been all about coffee and health and organic production and regenerative farming for years longer than it's been a thing, and they've known that coffee is this health. So somehow we found, well, it was our importer Ally Coffee who found these producers. My friend Ricardo there, as he would travel around the world, he'd find a producer who is focused on coffee and health, and there aren't that many. And he would say, I got to hook you up with Purity. So now we have our core producers, and they are incredible. And we really can laboratory test for different levels of healthy compounds and unhealthy compounds, and keep the unhealthy out and promote the better healthy compounds. And then we just bought a farm in collaboration with supply chain experts, a bunch of industry experts. We all bought a farm together to say, how can we create the healthiest coffee from farm to cup, keeping every step of the chain healthy? And a lot of that has to do with food safety, which not a lot of coffee people focus on, and they need to start focusing on.
So that's interesting. So then where do you think like the future of coffee research and education should head? Like what should they focus on? Because I love the focus that you've had around health benefits and food safety. Because I think you're spot on. It plays such a huge role in quality at the end of the day. Like what do you think the industry should focus on?
Well, it's interesting because actually the commercial coffee industry focuses on health. The National Coffee Association, which represents like our biggest coffee corporation, they're the ones who are all about coffee and health. The Specialty Coffee Association still is focused on flavor and taste, and how can we get that unique flavor experience? And they kind of are missing the boat on health. In fact, they're going in some directions. I think that's not healthy. Yeah, I mean, I met a producer the other day, and he puts tangerine peels in his anaerobic fermentation. Well, I actually have a friend who's allergic to citrus. So here now you've introduced this allergen to get a flavor, but if that person doesn't know this, it's imbued in the seed now. I don't know how she's going to react to it. If she may just get a little sick or her throat itch. And people never think it's the coffee. They'll be like, gosh, there must have been something in that sandwich I ate. When it's like, no, it was the coffee.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I've been fascinated with. I'm a little bit of a health nut anyway, and just focus on like reading a lot of stuff about, different things that, are healthy for you. And of course, you can take that too far as well.
Yeah, there's a disease called orthorexia that is when you take it too far. It's a form of anorexia. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. So, okay, so I'm going to shift this to you because we are running out of time and I have so many questions I want to ask about you personally. So, so mentors, when you look at everything you've accomplished, again, like I said earlier in the interview, you can't make your story up. It is like a novel. I love it. And so, when you look at all those different points and all those different steps along the way, there's always people that are helping or that have influenced you in some way, shape, or form. So who has had the most impact on you, or who's inspired you, whether it's in coffee or just in life?
I would say I have three women, older women, who inspired me. The first was Barbara Patterson. She was a theater teacher in high school who just loved life and just said, go love life and live life. And that was great. Roberta Buchanan ran the Howard Area Community Center, could not have been a better mentor. But I met a woman when I was at university who I stayed in touch with for many years, Dr. Margaret Brenman Gibson of Harvard University. She was part of the Center for Psychological Studies in a Nuclear Age. And she had been involved. I mean, she was just a peace activist, an anti-nuclear activist, and like she and Daniel Ellsberg were good buddies, and she just stuck with me and talk about just her intellectual pursuits and just including just everybody, the human spirit and all of that. She met the Dalai Lama, and I mean, she worked with the Dalai Lama. She was an amazing person. And so, yeah. But I have to say now, and I'm not blowing smoke, I love working with this team at Purity. Andrew Salisbury and John Butcher are these two leaders, and I understand these leadership books now. When I read them and see the best practices, I'm like, there's nothing better than people who embody these great leadership
100%.
practices.
Leaders can make all the difference in the world, for not only for the employees, but for the customer experience, everything. It is this beautiful, beautiful ripple effect. Okay, so Ildi, do you have a life motto or just simply words that you live by?
Good thing that this is not live. So I do actually. I remember, and this was Margaret who taught me this. She had met Mother Teresa, and Mother Teresa had met a journalist, and as they were walking through the streets of Calcutta, this journalist said, "Just with all the poverty around you, how can you feel successful in what you do?" And she looked at him and she said, "I'm not here to be successful. I'm here to serve." And I feel like that is, if I had a motto, I'm here to serve, because it's just a cup of coffee, but each person picks up that coffee, they go off and do their life that day. If I have done my core work, making that the best, healthiest cup of coffee, and then you start your day and all the good work you're going to do, and then you touch all those people, and then all those people touch other people, suddenly that cup of coffee, the energy that's in that one cup gets transferred to you and to this and this. And that is the beauty of being in the coffee industry and being a servant in the coffee industry. So
I love that. Ildi, I absolutely love that. That encapsulates everything like I believe in, this beautiful positive energy you want to share and you want to impact. It just, again, it's that foundation for the start of their day and the impact they can have. So if you're, as a leader in this industry, what would you say are 3 words that you would use to describe yourself?
Passionate, sensitive, I guess, and just tenacious at learning. The learning is endless. As I've dived into this health aspects of coffee, I've come full circle back to the science I taught in Binga in the Zambezi Valley, and just the wonderment in this plant medicine virtually that coffee can possibly be, and what makes it that way. We have barely scratched the surface of it. So there's something in that whole just continual learning.
Yeah. Being a lifelong learner, I think is, I 100% have to put that at the top of my list. One of the things at the top of my list too. It's who I am. I crave it. I need it.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. So, okay. So I'm going to do these next couple questions, sort of rapid fire. So just little, quick answers. Do you have a general coffee industry, like an industry stat that you find interesting, fascinating, or one that you religiously follow besides coffee future prices?
Health benefits in many cases are dose dependent. They double down, especially when it comes to liver. So 2 cups is better than 1, 3 cups is better than 2, and so on. But I have to say one thing before we go crazy with coffee is caffeine is an issue for a lot of people, and we cannot just promote coffee without being careful to the people who are slow caffeine metabolizers and sensitive to caffeine. And I know you want to do this fire question, but this is really an important point that I want to get across. And I love decaf drinkers. Why? Because they are drinking coffee because they love it, not for the buzz, because they love the flavor, because they love coffee. And so one of the things we're doing at Purity is I'm trying to create the most amazing decaf to honor these decaf drinkers, because not everybody can drink coffee because of caffeine. I mean, first of all, people on certain drugs, it's their interactions they cannot have. And like one of them is an epilepsy drug. If they drink coffee, it's not good for them, And also Alzheimer's patients, once somebody, it's coffee is good in the prevention of Alzheimer's, but once somebody has Alzheimer's, that caffeine can cause anxiety and really exacerbate some of the behaviors and symptoms that Alzheimer's patients exhibit, and they don't realize it's because they're drinking this caffeinated coffee. So there are times that caffeine is, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to circle back around to you after this interview on the decaf coffee, because I think that's one area I agree with you. I don't feel like there are a lot of roasters or even farmers focused on it enough, but we'll talk about that sort of offline.
I don't like the disrespect of decaf. Like, I went into a cafe and their decaf coffee name was Why Bother? And I was like, that is so rude. There's a lot of reasons to bother. There is chlorogenic acid in that cup. You're going to do some really good, internal work with that coffee.
I got you. Okay, so Ildi, I honestly could talk to you for like hours. But I'm gonna run and through this one. This is what I call the U3 top 3. So again, very brief answers. Your favorite brewing method?
It's funny. I have a spin machine. It's a grind and brew system. I won't say it's my favorite, but I do like a really good mechanical brewer, like electric brewer that does it right.
Okay, so like a drip coffy when you say mechanical brewer.
Yeah, drip coffee. There's some really good ones out there.
There absolutely
and
is.
I like it. It's because they're consistent.
Yeah, consistency.
And I can program them how I want them.
Yes. Technology. That is not a bad thing. Okay, so for consumption, do you like your coffee drink of choice, like black or, with extras like latte, hot or cold, a specific origin or wash, just coffee drink
Es-
of choice.
Espresso, a
Okay.
single shot of espresso, a double shot of espresso,
Okay. And how many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
3 to 5.
3 to 5. And so that is awesome. Again, I could talk to you for hours, but I'm going to wrap it up and I want to give you the opportunity to share where someone can learn more about you or Purity Coffee.
Puritycoffee.com is the website. And about me, there's I don't know. I don't really get out there as much as I probably should.
We need to get you out there more. You have incredible stories to share. And that's part of the reason we're doing this.
Well, thank you thank you for seeing me, Christy.
Absolutely. Ildi, it was so nice talking to you. And I appreciate you joining us today. And of course, for helping us unite the world through coffee.
Yay! And keep people healthy through coffee.
Yes, healthy through coffee.
Improve the world's health through coffee. That's the Purity motto.
I like that. I like that a lot. All right. Well, you'll have to go check out Purity Coffee. And thanks to you, all of our followers, for joining us at U3 Coffee. We'll see you next time.